The Minnesota Vikings are on their search for another quarterback to join JJ McCarthy and give him a challenge heading into next season. And the recent reports have revealed that one veteran quarterback could be the answer for the Minnesota Vikings. We're going to be talking about Matthew Stafford here in this video and what he could look like in a Minnesota Vikings uniform here in this video. Before we get into it, though, we notice that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot to get all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button, join us here on the channel. We are covering everything that is going to be brought from this offseason because it is going to be a very busy one. Without any further ado, though, let's get into our first topic here, which is a very big quote, kind of identifying Stafford as a potential suitor for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I say potential because when we're looking at this, there are many, many different things that would have to go right for the Minnesota Vikings to acquire Matthew Stafford. It says, with Stafford, he has been vocal about wanting to play for a contender. The Vikings are that. And with Sam Darnold set to hit free agency, they could very well be looking for a quarterback. While they have JJ McCarthy, he will be coming off right knee injury that sidelined him for his entire rookie season. How McCarthy looks coming off the injury is an unknown factor for the Vikings, and they can't take a chance on. Not to mention, it would be wise to have him sit for a few games to get back up to speed and adjust without being rushed into playing. With Stafford, he's provided the experience needed to help McCarthy develop while also commanding the offense. He is aging, put up a 4,295-yard season and 24 touchdowns, with 8 interceptions over this regular season and the playoff game, against the Philadelphia Eagles. And with Stafford coming off the Rams as well, he will fit in Kevin O'Connell's scheme seamlessly, as O'Connell came from McVay's tree. And, that's really a lot of what we've been hearing. Stafford, Kevin O'Connell, the Rams, all of this kind of linking the Vikings to be number one contenders, I guess we could say, for Matthew Stafford. However, we look at JJ McCarthy, a guy who has come off this injury, has been notably ready to go from what he's been saying, very vocal about wanting a chance, very vocal about wanting a fair chance. And when you go, and we'll discuss this a bit later as well, but when you go in to look at a guy like JJ McCarthy, who is ready to go, and you get a guy like Matthew Stafford's not going to be a guy sitting on the bench. So it does leave a lot of questions for how this search is going to go, and as well as what is going to happen with the search for a Vikings quarterback, not just named Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, it's compelling to see like that the Vikings are still shopping, or there's ideas being floated out there. The Vikings are going after these old quarterbacks. I know Stafford is a lot shinier of a toy than Aaron Rodgers would be because the numbers are a lot better. Stafford, he can still sling it. Yes, he's 38, but he can still put up over 4,000 yards in a season and keep you in single-digit interceptions. The passing touchdowns weren't as big this season, despite having Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I think with the weapons that Minnesota has, he would still maintain around like a 25 to 30 touchdown area. But if they bolster down the run game like they're expected to do in the offseason, especially with the draft coming up as well, that would give a little more support for Stafford as well. So he's not having to do as much as he's getting older. And he's still able to sling it, but he can rely on his run game a bit more. We saw how he relied on that run game with Kyren Williams in LA. So if he can bring that over to Minnesota and they go out and get a good two-back tandem where you're not having a guy that you trust with 20 touches a game, because we know whether it's Aaron Jones or Najee Harris or somebody else, Minnesota is not built to be a 20-touch running back team unless that person's Adrian Peterson or Dalvin Cook. Unless that next person comes in like that, I don't see that happening for Minnesota. And to keep up with Detroit, we need that 1-2 knockout punch in the backfield. So having that with Stafford would be perfectly complementary, especially with his age, with his injury history as well. I don't entirely love it, despite him, with the experience that he has, I don't entirely love him coming to Minnesota, just because JJ McCarthy, he's been waiting. You drafted him for a reason. However, because he didn't play last season and was injured, he wasn't even able to be in a backup position spot. So he wasn't even in game situations. So he doesn't know what regular season NFL is like or big time games are like. So he's still going to need that mentorship or just still need that time to adjust to that. We don't want to repeat, or we don't want to see what happened with Bryce Young happen in Minnesota, where Bryce Young is realizing his potential now, but it took a season or two, or two and a half seasons really, to get to that point for him. We don't want to do it with JJ McCarthy, especially when we have Justin Jefferson signed for only 4 years. We want to win now while we can. I think bringing in Stafford would be a good way towards mentoring him. However, like you said, you're not going to bring Stafford in to sit on the bench. He's going to want to play, and it's going to be just like Darnold. But the thing is, JJ McCarthy learning behind Matthew Stafford versus Sam Darnold are two entirely different things.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of speculation about what kind of quarterback the Vikings are looking for. They really haven't came out and said, yeah, we're looking for a veteran guy. We're looking for this guy who can run. They haven't really said much, but the reports have still been out there and they have not been shut down, which is leading many people to really wonder that. But when it comes down to it, it does seem like the Vikings are going to be in the market for that older style of quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford type of player. They're not going to be going for a guy who's 27, 28, 29, like Sam Darnold once again, who, first of all, Sam Darnold specifically will be making too much money, but second of all, could be here for a long time. When you're looking at Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers, these guys are going to be here, I would assume, maximum 2 years, of course, if they end up signing with the Vikings. But giving that timeline to kind of let JJ McCarthy sit behind, we've seen it work out. We've seen it with Jordan Love in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. Much a different situation, Aaron Rodgers being there for multiple years, but JJ McCarthy sitting behind, and with Kevin O'Connell being that quarterback whispering coach that we know has been able to do some very, very good things with quarterbacks, I don't think that necessarily we need JJ McCarthy to be sitting behind someone for that long. I do think that even the first season was great and whatnot, but I think that it could be a thing where we go for a quarterback that could maybe start half the season if need be, potentially the first few games, because we know JJ McCarthy, of course, coming off the injury, still looks very, very good as he did in preseason last year, but Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell won a Super Bowl as Stafford's offensive coordinator with the Rams, so the connection is worth at least exploring. The Rams could also be cleaning house this offseason, which is a very another interesting thing of what the plan could be for not just the Rams, but the Vikings here in this instance where they have been linked to Stafford. As they could be cleaning house, they put wide receiver Cooper Kupp on the trade block. Head coach Sean McVay recently gave a political answer when asked by reporters if Stafford would be his QB in 2025, stating, "We'll talk about those things at the appropriate time." And looking at a trade for Matthew Stafford, that is an absolutely ridiculous thing for the Vikings to do. First of all, they have no assets. Second of all, he would be a little bit more expensive than what teams would like. Third of all, he's making way too much money. The option that we're looking at right now is, of course, being cut by the Rams. And trading for Stafford's current contract doesn't make much sense for the Vikings. If they are ready to hand the reins to McCarthy this season due to his knee injury, they could bring back a known commodity in Darnold. The structure would be front-loaded deal that keeps McCarthy as their heir apparent. The Vikings also don't have excess draft capital to justify a move like this. They only have 4 projected selections in the 2025 draft. And cutting Stafford for the Rams would save them, I believe $30 million, something around the lines of that. So obviously, it's a very big on the table option for the Rams. And given that, he would have that money ready to go. He probably wouldn't be searching for a big contract, and being able to make a guy, hey, come on, man, come on, we're ready to get some playoff wins. We got a guy here that can learn from you. That's a very Matthew Stafford, Minnesota Vikings connection, it does seem like, for JJ McCarthy as well. So there are some options with that, and of course, cutting him, as saving a lot of money after this June 1st designation would really save not just the Rams a lot of money, but also give the Vikings a very, very interesting, cheap quarterback option, and really give them control of not just term, not just price, but really of what they want to do with their future in the quarterback room.
There's a lot that Minnesota has to consider here. I know the most likely one is going to be that they're probably just going to roll with JJ McCarthy, have Daniel Jones as a backup, let Sam Darnold walk. As much as I hate to say it, the second likely one is going to be that Sam Darnold stays and JJ McCarthy stays learning behind him, and he's just ready to go in. If they put the transition tag on Darnold or the franchise tag where they can move him and still get compensation for it, and JJ is ready to step in, I could see that being also a very likely one as well. But if we're talking in the hypothetical world right now where Matthew Stafford does come to Minnesota, I think of all the options that Minnesota would have if it wasn't JJ McCarthy, Matthew Stafford is the most appealing, because Sam Darnold, he was brought in to take us as far as he could. We saw how far he could take us. I know it was initially on a prove-it deal, but as the season went on, the expectation and the responsibility and the weight of the season, he was given that captaincy for a reason. So the responsibility got heavier as the season went on, so did the expectation. So with that, he had contract expectations, Super Bowl expectations. He fell short of that. Minnesota saw that he fell short of that. So yeah, we want to avoid Kirk Cousins 2.0. So what do? You go out and get a guy who's proven to win playoff games. Matthew Stafford, he has a Super Bowl. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer as well. Why not add a second Super Bowl to that? And if he's going to go to any other team that isn't the Rams, Minnesota is the most built to win now team that he could go to as far as an offensive standpoint with the weapons he has. He could go and play with an even greater talent than Cooper Kupp, an even greater talent than Puka Nacua. Running back, Kyron Williams is very elite, so Minnesota would have to make up for a little bit there. But TJ Hawkinson, a great reliable tight end that he would have as well. So there's so many weapons where Stafford could very well take this team to the promised land. He could be the one to fulfill the Brett Favre destiny that he could not do, where yes, he takes us to the NFC Championship game, we win that game, get to the Super Bowl, and he can get us over that hump. He did it for the Rams in his first year. Why not come to Minnesota, try and do that on a 1-year deal, win a Super Bowl, go right off into the sunset with your wife and your twin girls, and just enjoy retirement as a future Hall of Famer with 2 Super Bowls and potentially a Super Bowl MVP. I know this is all crazy hypotheticals. This offseason just started. There's a lot of things that still have to come out with it. But while we're in the speculation world and while we're hypothesizing on the possibility of Stafford coming here, I think of all the other options, especially if Aaron Rodgers is the other option, Matthew Stafford is clearly the one to take.
Yeah, and one thing I kind of want to throw on top of that as well is, even though, Matthew Stafford is in his final years, we have a very big win now window. Of course, that is closing. There's no doubt about that. But with the age of this team, the way that we're structured, the where we got last year, as young as this team is, that window is still quite large. So whether Stafford, wants to try and get it done in 1, whether, he has a window of maximum 3, I think the Vikings have that option to be able to use 3 of those years as kind of that bargaining chip. Now, of course, 3 years down the road, I highly doubt Matthew Stafford would be a starting quarterback, not just because of age and whatnot, but also because JJ McCarthy would certainly be ready by then. But that window is quite big, and I think it's something that the Vikings could definitely use as a piece to be like, hey, we're not just 1 year. It wasn't just last year. We're going to have a better chance this year and even likely the year after. And that could very much entice Matthew Stafford because, as you said, Griffen, the idea of getting that Super Bowl win and then retiring could be a very big piece for Matthew Stafford and what his future would hold. But, of course, as I mentioned earlier, one more thing little before we end this video, JJ McCarthy coming out and saying that he wants a fair chance. It's another big piece of this kind of whole idea of signing a quarterback because the Vikings they don't want to make JJ McCarthy mad. They don't want to make him, disappointed by not being given the chance because, as I mentioned, if Matthew Stafford were to come into this team, he would likely be given that starter role. They wouldn't make Matthew Stafford, as you mentioned, a Hall of Famer compete for a starting spot. So giving him that fair chance would really not be in line with what Matthew Stafford would bring to this team. But he said all I can ask for is a fair opportunity. But when money does come into it, it does get a bit political. And, that's just any sport at this point now where we're at. And JJ McCarthy, of course, a very, I feel, well-experienced, player in his mind already in the NFL, but he has the right idea. There's many questions about what will happen. Will it be a new quarterback? Will it be JJ McCarthy? And it is only going to be time to tell. We can't make a guess right now because we have so many things leading up to, free agency and the draft and everything before this team actually gets figured out. But I do like the idea of JJ McCarthy, but I also do like the idea of Matthew Stafford. So, Griffen, do you have anything before we finish this video off?
It's going to be a wild off season. There's so many things that we're going to be covering and so many theories and rumors that are coming out as well. Ones that we're going to hopefully try and predict before they happen. I know as far as other sports go, there's been a lot of deals that have happened in other sports that we cover as well, where things have happened where we've predicted things happen. People give us crap for it in the comments, but then those things end up happening and we end up looking like Nostradamus. So hopefully there's some things that happen this offseason where I think Aaron Jones potentially leaving could be very likely. So if we're predicting that he leaves and Najee Harris comes in, a few people I've talked to about that possibility, they've really enjoyed that potential of Minnesota and Najee Harris. So I think if that's one thing that happens, I would love to be able to predict that right in here and now. But as far as other takes that happen throughout the offseason, we're just going to have to see how it plays out once free agency begins.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff is going to be happening, starting likely tomorrow at the time of recording this video, but that's going to be for a later day. So if you want to get that news, though, be sure to hit the sub button, join us here on the channel. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of Vikings news is coming. You won't want to miss it. We'll have it right here for you guys. But that's all we got for this video. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well, but we're signing up. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.